transition now. We have Bec Chapin, co-founder and CEO of Node, who's going to be talking about transforming the construction industry within sustainable homes for everyone. Really an important topic for this day in which we live. Thanks for being with us today, Bec. Excited to hear about these sustainable homes. And I'm going to step back and let you tell us what you have going on.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate the opportunity to share, what we're up to and also what I think is coming in construction tech. But with this presentation, I kind of took a tack to what needs to happen. Like, what are the changes that we're looking to see, and the ways that um, people need to innovate and how we need to work together. So um, I will go ahead and share my screen here. Cool. Well, I'm Bec Chapin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Node. We are a construction technology startup, and my background's in construction. I grew up in Connecticut, building houses, foundations to roofing, and everything in between. From residential construction, I moved out west and got into modular prefab. I was with Method Homes, where we were doing architectural prefab in a factory, big box modular. Super exciting time in the mid aughts there, in the late aughts, when really quality prefab was really taking off. Um, Headed over to spec and urban infill, and now construction tech. I mean, I think I'm the kind of person that once you see enough problems, you have to try to actually fix them. Status quo has never worked for me. Node is we're building engineered house assembly kits. We're optimizing for easy, fast install on site by generalist labor. So we've built a kit of parts that go together like Legos with base components that can make up tons of designs. Those components are standardized to allow the power of manufacturing to come for construction. We have whole house kits, and we also have component product kits that are able to be installed on their own, which allows us to address a lot of different building asset types much faster, altogether reducing the time to build while we build more sustainably. We are backed by venture capitalists and accelerators to build our software-enabled house assembly to scale. So really the whole thing was, how do we address construction to change? We believe that all the technology to build carbon negative homes exist, but we aren't doing it because the construction industry is optimized for on-site labor and for the cheapest price. So in order to create a solution that matters, we need to scale it, which kind of gets us into the why. And I zoomed back out on this because it's always like orienting for me to remember why building is such a big deal. And just some high level pictures. We'll be building, we're doubling global building stock by 2060. Another way to put it is that we are going to be building the entirety of New York City every month globally. So there's just a ton of building to come. And building are legacy items that last a long time, so how we build them really matters. Also, the number of people living in cities is going to double by 2060. So in 2060, out of 10 billion people, 2/3 of people will be living in cities. Cities need to grow. We need smart and human scale density. And on the bright side, when we live in cities, we actually have the lowest carbon footprints than when we live more rurally. So the average carbon footprint in the US is 16 tons per year, but in New York City, it's 6 tons. In Seattle, it's 4 tons. So we really can create efficiencies, less vehicle miles traveled, just that density of people helps. So it kind of gets us to the next place of buildings generate 40% of global carbon emissions. About 25% of that is how they're built in the construction process and logistics, and the other 75% is operations over time. So buildings really matter. If our buildings are going to last a couple hundred years and we build them not efficiently, they're going to be not efficient for a couple hundred years. Even in housing, we're looking at, a good house is going to last over 100 years. So it's a big deal. How we build and where we build really matters. And that keeps us going. And I believe that's why construction tech doesn't just need to change for capitalism and for efficiency's sake, but because we have a global mandate. A little faster, but a little closer to home, we have a giant construction housing market. It's about 530 billion a year. And for as much as we build, we have a giant housing deficit. We have a housing shortage that's worth like $2.5 trillion and is about 3.8 million units. And that's entry home units. That is balancing the market. That's not even talking about homelessness. So we need more housing supply stat. Meanwhile, we're pairing it with a historic construction labor shortage. And this is really where I think construction has a lot of room to take this as an opportunity. The shortage has been projected for decades. Workers aren't going to trades, and our recent immigration policy has made it worse. Just to build that shortage that's not getting built at all, we have a missing 5.7 billion labor hours. So we need to do something to make us need less hours to build house, and maybe even a different kind of people. To add insult to injury, construction is not becoming more productive. Demand is at an all-time high, but it's lagging world productivity increases. Even the average world productivity increase, not even including manufacturing. So what do we need to do to change? This is everything is the answer. And actually McKinstry wrote a really interesting study a couple years ago now that had 7 items that they really thought we needed to change. I think we can simplify it a little bit, but pretty much everything. And the problem is that the whole industry is deeply fragmented and it's siloed. One stakeholder does their job and hand it off to the next. There's no feedback. And in order to fix this, we need to create a new ecosystem. We need to evolve into something that works together and has feedback, and so we can get to continuous improvement. We have to create that new ecosystem. So taking it from the top, zoning and building code regulations are a huge problem. And this is mostly policy. It's mostly, the stuff that's hard to innovate out through entrepreneurship. And I believe some folks are working on it, and God bless them, especially in the permitting space. But if you look at this map here from the National Home Builders Association, we've got this mix of building codes out there. And there's even states that have 0 statewide building code. And building code is for life safety. So, there's a lot of ways that we can affect this system but it has to come from policy and lawmakers, the fastest moving people in our ecosystem, right? Excuse my sarcasm. The other thing about zoning that is just, I think, really important to say is that zoning has been a tool of oppression, especially in the United States. It's famously known for redlining, preventing Black folks from owning homes in specific neighborhoods. Some of that is carried over today, but it continues. And this is why wealthy neighborhoods get to stay looking quaint in single family homes, but it means that we don't get the density we need. A lot of places are really pushing an up zone. California allowed mandated ADUs on lots, or not to build them, but that they had to be allowed by zoning. Seattle just did a big up zone. There's ways that we have to progress this if we're going to fix the problem. I'll leave it there because it's not really where, to me, the easiest place to engage is. Maybe if you're a politician. I think it starts to get really interesting. We evolve the silos into an ecosystem. The construction value change is linear with no feedback, like I just mentioned. And this idea has been around for a while that we need to do integrated design teams, which is the concept based on the wild idea that if we got all the people designing a project together in the same room at the same time, instead of handing drawings from one to the next without any feedback, and they just have to work around each other. This is helpful and it's really helping, but it's even bigger than that. How do we create, not even integrated design process, but the integrated construction team? And I don't believe it has to be vertically integrated into a singular company, but we have to change how we're working together. There's a lot of stakeholders on a project, and one of the places that we find the most pushback is in that user space where, not users, but installers. They're busy and there's not enough of them, and they're getting paid really well right now. And we're like, we're going to do something different. And they're like, I don't want to. It's easier for me to just keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm too busy. And I've been a general contractor, and I have to tell you, it is the hardest I've ever worked. You work all day, site to site, installing things, and then on night, you're trying to order stuff for the next day or the next week, and there's no break. So I appreciate why there's not focus on what's new, but we have to figure out a way to bring everybody into the next ecosystem. We have to get everyone aligned. So the power of manufacturing to construction. This is probably the most exciting for me. The promise of prefab. Let's build houses like cars. Let's build 3D printed houses like Star Trek, and let's build with robots 100% of the time. I believe it's coming. And it's hard to imagine a construction industry 100 years from now that doesn't look very different than what it looks like today. Um, but I don't think 3D printing and robots are the next step. They're not the next big phase of construction. I think they'll have a role, and I think we need to develop that technology because it needs to come. But I think we have to hit with this really complex ecosystem. We need to start making gains sooner. We need to get more manufactured components on site. We need to do what we have to do to get there, make more standards so that not necessarily in design, but in components and how they fit together so that we can start breaking down the other parts of the ecosystem that don't work for us and really launch um, this full scale solution. Um, you know, the construction industry is a commodity. It's commodity efficient, right? So we even saw this with material price volatility, and lumber is already coming down in cost because it always just goes to the cheapest price. And it also means that in order to have breakthroughs in manufacturing and construction, we need to attack the cost curves at scale. This is one of the places that I think the ecosystem is mandatory. I don't think that we can just create new construction components and manufacture them and then expect people to adopt them. That's part of that ecosystem I'm talking about. Like, we need to start partnering with each other and working together. Um, the real promise of manufacturing construction is mass customization, which is kind of a wild concept when we think about like a manufacturing line that could build almost anything, within range of a very wild range. And I believe that can come, but I think we have to just get manufacturing into construction first, and then we can optimize manufacturing in construction. But we're at this point where um, we aren't really adopting it. We adopted roof trusses. That's cool. Great. But that was a long time ago. Like, we haven't had these major adoptions again. This is something that our company focuses on a lot. So happy to answer more questions about this. We have to improve on-site execution. Um, it's really hard to explain the issues with site construction to folks outside the industry because it's pretty simple. Like I mentioned, the whole industry is optimized for fixing in the field, which means that it's also impossible to not have field fixes. I think the terms rework and punch list are insane. Like, they mean that the system is inherently inefficient, and that is like most of site construction. To give an example of what it looks like today in residential, and commercial is different, and maybe I didn't mention that yet, but it's important to say commercial construction has a lot more systems, a lot more regular players and repeat users. So they have some other things going on. But in residential, you've got your plumber scheduled for Monday, but they have to get all the pipes installed where they need to be, but they can't come because they had a schedule push somewhere else. So they're delayed by a week. So the electrician comes and does some work. But then when the plumber comes back a week later, the electrical is in the way of the plumbing. So the plumber walks off. And so then you have to get your electrician back, but they can't come back for another week. I mean, it's just on and on and on. The critical path dependencies of construction and on-site execution make it very hard to create more efficiencies without new products and new manufactured products making site construction easier. Software is coming to construction. It has been slow adopted because most contractors have less than 10 employees. But obviously it is the future, everything else. We have very powerful computers in our pocket. Everybody on construction sites have them. How do we do this? And I'm not talking about smart home. Smart home is something that users add on later. Most consumers don't even ask for smart homes. They're going to bring the technology they want later. I'm talking about the technology that's going to be transformative. Here's a picture of augmented reality being used on a construction site to show where the ley lines are for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. It's this augmented reality, LiDAR, optical recognition that's going to improve construction install, quality control. We're going to have a more complete design through technology and more automation. And I think this is actually a really important bridge. To get manufactured components into the field, I think we need technology to help the workforce adopt it. And we have to activate any workforce. There's a true lack of construction labor, and especially residentially, relies heavily on immigrants. Most Americans are going to college instead of going into the trades. But we had plenty of unemployed people before COVID, and even more now, people who are no longer wanting those minimum wage jobs, which hasn't been enough for a long time. How do we bring them into construction? Well, maybe they don't want to be a roofer. They don't want to run around with a heavy nail gun. They don't want to do the schooling to become a plumber or an electrician. But I believe that there's a way to use the manufactured components as an easier install to allow a technology enabled workforce to emerge that will be providing family sustaining wages, which will really be solving kind of the shifting labor problem that we're having at this time. People who want to work with their hands, who are also tech savvy, who need that other kind of job is who I'm seeing come into the workforce. And as we're seeing waitresses and waiters quit, um, I believe it's a real opportunity for construction tech. So there's a lot of people working on construction tech, and I avoided the opportunity to dive into some of my favorite examples and some ones that a lot of people know, because I think what's actually more important is like with every big jump and every big, any big construction tech failure, there's actually been a ton of innovation. This industry is so fragmented, and any given solution is not going to necessarily even be adoptable unless you spread across the ecosystem of all those 6 channels. Um, which is really an interesting time to innovate and to partner. And I believe we have to do more than just innovate, construction tech hardware like the building pieces and the software. I believe we have to innovate partnerships. I think we have to combine and do it differently. Um, One of my big lessons from COVID, and maybe it resonates for some of you, but we aren't alone. I mean, we felt really alone maybe in COVID, but we weren't alone. If we went outside without a mask, maybe we could hurt somebody because our actions affect each other, right? But there's this other thing that came for me with this is like, oh, we can't do this alone. Construction tech, nobody in construction tech and construction innovation can actually do this alone. We have to find ways to partner together and work together um, in order to hit the multiple tipping points that need to hit it to get to the growing trends that will change the construction industry so that we can have that robotic, automated, 3D printed future. We have to be working together now to really bring this lagging industry into the technological revolution. Um, Sometimes I like to share some lessons I learned this year, but I think actually it would be more fun right now with this smaller group to do some questions and maybe I can give you some information that is more specific to what you're looking for.
Thanks, Beck. Um, I think one interesting question that kind of crossed my mind as you were talking about kind of what Node does with your build out and your goal for kind of a more manufacturer styled home. Um, what do you see as kind of in the next few years the challenges to really um, overcome to enhance the adoption across the industry um, of that style of production?
Great. That's a great question. I think manufacturing wise, we probably have it down. I think even sales wise, because we're selling market rate quality into market rate and affordable pipelines. So that's the desire to buy is decently high. I think our biggest gap is installers. We're creating components, some of which work like appliances. So we have an MEP wall that is effectively an appliance. And as we bring that to site, traditional installers aren't used to seeing that. Maybe they don't want to see it. Maybe they don't know what to do with it. So what kind of training do we need to get people on board? And our real unlock will be as we start to activate a new workforce for construction. And that's a whole other bucket of things. Like, so I've gotten really good at prefab and manufacturing and integrating software into manufacturing. Cool. And then what about training a whole workforce or like figuring out how to license up the workforce? So I think in the next 18 months, we're going to start to tackle the workforce piece. And I think we're going to learn a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, it's exciting what you guys are doing and kind of the shifts in the industry to see. I'm sure everybody will be excited when the construction cost of wood and material goes back to a more normal level for you guys. But um, it's really exciting to kind of understand what Node's doing and your transformation in the space and kind of what that's going to bring. Obviously, you believe it. And I think from um, a lover of technology standpoint, I suppose, I also believe kind of in that as well. And really allowing that to be sustainable and accessible to everyone. So that's exciting to see your guys' work in that field. So thank you so much for your time today, and coming and being a part of One Business World conference with us today. The leading entrepreneurs of the world has been an awesome day, and you've been a great part of that. So I appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Jonathan, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Bec, and all the best in the future to you.
Thanks.